Just press this.
Yeah, the button should be up.
My name is Aram Garabedian. I've been in the State House, I think, for a total of, about 10 years. School committee, Cranston, 6 years. 4 years as city council president. It's been a long road of observation and participation. And I had to come here because the one section of the Constitution I always remembered was Article 1, Section 2. All free governments are instituted for the protection, safety, and happiness of the people. So think about that. All free governments are instituted for the protection, safety, and happiness of the people. Therefore, all laws should be made for the good of the whole, and the burdens of the state be fairly distributed amongst its citizens. Well, I've been around a long time, and the laws that are passed are not consistent with our Constitution for good of the whole, or in the case of the burdens fairly distributed amongst its citizens. So I came here, and I can see what happens. We have a system right now that we all get elected in representative districts. And we now propose the delegates be elected. Sounds like a smart way to do it. But I sit and think about how fear tactics are placed on the citizenry who really don't know this process. And I would say, as they conduct polls for elections, you conduct a poll of the general knowledge of the public about this process. They basically have little or no knowledge about it. I know that because I've probably questioned several hundred people what they know about it. So what is wrong with a constitutional convention where delegates are elected in a democratic process, just as the reps and senators who sit here, and then they go and debate in a public place? What is there to fear? It's all public. Then they present to the citizens. The people aren't familiar with this. They present their findings to the public to vote on. With all the bills the General Assembly passes that are special interest, they have no right to, the public doesn't have a right to reject those, do they? They don't. So in this case, the purest form of democracy, where people are elected to serve the people, we have people who say, we oppose this because of this, based on fear, based on what they have, what they fear to be taken away. I have no fear of the people of Rhode Island going to a constitutional convention, and I think the results of the last one, brought about some good things. I'm a big term limit guy. I'm a big believer in term limits. I did a study of them. They go back before many of us were on the planet. It goes way back in time, where term limits and power many times breed corruption. In the way our system is currently today, in our General Assembly, I definitely feel that term limits are in order. And believe me when I tell you, I know people here serve with honor, great honor. However, the system itself, and I can speak from my business background in a corporation, okay? 40 years associated with a corporation. To build up a company from 80,000 in sales to 2.8 billion in sales, and sell the company for 3.75 billion. But I put my 20 years in time, went to hundreds of meetings, and I believe that the people who passed our Constitution way on and call for conventions, and by the way, the concern about cost, that bothers the heck out of me to throw that cost factor up. When's the last time we had a cost for a constitutional convention? And I may be wrong. I was a member of the General Assembly for 10 years. I don't know what the latest number is. Someone said $38 million a year to run the Assembly. Then if you go to Con, they have a whole page of cost factors, what it comes down to. The cost factors, if you look them up, based on taking the figure from the previous was 800 and some thousand. They put on a number that made it 1.4 million. Whether it be 1.4 million, 2 million, those who come up here and put that on the table, after not having the opportunity, the people of Rhode Island, to vote on a constitutional convention, and the last one was how many years ago? How many? Is it 30? 30 years, and they're bringing up the cost, and yet you could control the cost with a budget. The fear of it being carried away. There's no secondary statement by the person that says, but the people have a right to vote on it. That's never put out there by the people who present the fear factors. So I propose that the people of Rhode Island to pass the Constitutional Convention, not to have any fear. Everything is done in open. And this was my opportunity to come here. And I would hope that this is so important. It should never be at a special election. Never. And you know what? We had a bond issue several years ago about Quonset Point, economic development. The people voted for it. They did the right thing. The idea that economic development has to be done in a manner, I believe, here in the General Assembly, the way we're organized, things that happen in Studio 38 can happen over again. And I, for one, would ask this, I'm going to ask the people, the Constitutional Convention, to consider the elimination of the moral obligation bonds. There are 3 of them. I remember participating in the House when a bond came up on the Fairmount Foundry. The Fairmount Foundry. I got a phone call from a person. They said, go up to Woonsocket and look at the foundry, Fairmount Foundry, that's going to take over Grinnell. Grinnell was a high energy cost thing, and they wanted to sell it. You know what I found? A broken down truck in front of it and a coal-operated foundry. They got some money, $2 or $3 million. I screamed in the State House for no avail. At that time, I was a Republican. Hopefully, I would have been a Democrat. I might have made more progress. But the honest thing is this. Don't be afraid of putting things forward. I have confidence in the people of Rhode Island. And let's examine one thing. The economy of our state. I've been studying at Bryant University with Ray Fogarty. I've been working with him on a program called What's Right About RI. I love my state. I love my state. There are many things right about Rhode Island, and I still have confidence in the people that a constitutional convention here should take place. And for those individuals who come forward, they have every right to oppose it in any way they can. But I would tell you this. They're wrong in doing it because they should have the faith that the right thing is to be done. And I would also say this publicly. Many of the organizations that have come out against it, NAACP, for example, I'm a lifetime member of that. I've given contributions to ACLU. They're against it. But it doesn't separate my views. That, in my opinion, they're wrong, and they don't have the faith that I have. So I would urge this group, if in the end, make sure it's voted on a general election and not a special election. A thing of this importance, constitutional questions and issues, should be voted on by the people at a general election. Okay? Thank you very much. Any questions?
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Garabedian? Yes, Senator Hodgson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Garabedian. A question to follow up on your statement about the moral obligation bonds. That's a subject that myself and a number of our colleagues have talked about as a possible question for a convention. And as an attorney, it presents me somewhat of a challenging analysis because moral obligation bonds don't seem to comply with the Constitution as written. So do you have any suggested language how we would prevent this end run around Article 6, Section 16
I would go on the
Constitution?
basis that you would put in and describe what moral obligation bonds have been developed as, okay, and they supposed to get higher interest rates, that moral obligations be prohibited, and you define them, and then you have general obligation bonds where the public passes, and that would be very, very clear to them, I think. I think you guys can come up with the language for that, but you got to get rid of it. You got to get rid of that.
We did submit legislation this year to accomplish that, to prohibit the practice of issuing these so-called moral obligations. But it was the most difficult statute I've ever written because essentially it was saying you have to follow the Constitution. But I think that's a worthy goal, and frankly, it's hard to see. It would be hard to imagine the political will to ever again use this moral obligation vehicle. But I think maybe the best analogy to use would be we should take those keys away before that car is crashed again.
I wouldn't hesitate. I'm convinced that the way we're structured here in the General Assembly, we have many, many people here who come from different varied backgrounds. And as far as areas in economic development and everything, we don't have too many of the individuals who run. A lot of businessmen don't run for office, and they're missing from here. And a lot of people have backgrounds outside that and interest. And I think that if you add it all up, it's a risk factor. And if something is really worthwhile economically, you want to face the people, give it to them, put it up to them, but don't go the moral obligation bond. Anything else? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Deal.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Garabedian, in 1986 or 85, there were 558 candidates that ran to represent their districts. Do you think we'd be able, if there is a convention, get that many people in the state today to run, or is the apathy gone out of the public?
I would say, I noticed six groups got together and they came up with $60,000, $70,000 of what's going on. I mean, about the convention. It takes a group of people to recruit candidates to run. I want you to know, if it passes, I will be one of them. And I've been actively working on it to have candidates. I plan myself. I know 4 people who I've approached, and I went after them for their backgrounds and everything. I say give the people of Rhode Island a chance. They've already demonstrated in surveys they're not happy with Rhode Island. They're unhappy people. Give them the opportunity to run, all an open process, bring back some good things, and when it's all over, they said it worked, we participated, and our democracy works.
Any further questions? Yes, Chairman McCaffrey.
Thank you. I just want to welcome my friend, former Senator Garabedian, former representative. He was fortunate. He served in the Senate with me, and I believe he served in the House of Representatives with my father a few years before that. Aram, you haven't lost your fastball. You're still as colorful today as you were when you came into the Senate, and welcome here this afternoon.
I really appreciate that, and I'm right now 79 years old. My birthday is 80 next year, and I don't feel more than 40. So I want you guys to know I'm not going. If this thing passes, I'll be an active candidate, and the people will be informed, and we will look back and say we did the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Could we next